All right, so we're here at Anime Milwaukee with Steve Blum. We just finished your Q&A, and it's really fun, you guys. Hopefully you'll check it out. Steve, how are you enjoying the con so far?
It's amazing. The people are amazing. The people actually are born with orange hair. This is fantastic. I'm having a great time.
Excellent. Sorry the weather is a bit cold. Like, it just swept right in right before the con, so...
I like it. It's horrible in California. It's 80 degrees. It's just blistering. No, this is actually kind of refreshing. It's nice.
Cool.
I don't mind it at all.
Well, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but we'd like to give you this opportunity. Is there anything you'd like to say to your fans or any inspiration you'd like to give them? This is your moment right now.
Wow, no pressure.
No, I know. I'm really sorry.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you guys for watching the shows and playing the games and supporting this industry, because it's a wonderful community and it's worldwide, and we get to come to places like this, and some of us don't necessarily fit in other parts of society, and here we're all one. There's no judgment. It's a family, and I'm proud to be part of this family. So thank you for welcoming me into your family. And I wouldn't have a gig without you, so thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah. Well, Steve, as an awkward nerd who's been watching you since high school, it's like seriously a pleasure to be in your presence, and just want to take time to thank you so much for doing the Q&A and for answering all of our goofy questions, which you guys will get to see.
Oh, dude, bring it in.
All right. Thank you guys so much, and enjoy the Q&A. Thank you.
Peace. Well, I identify with all the characters for different reasons, and I think that any actor will tell you that we kind of have to put ourselves in the mindset of each character as we're doing them. Mm-hmm. So I have to find some commonality, no matter how heinous the character is. They are a lot of bad guys too. I actually have to find myself digging into their psyche a little bit and finding some sort of connection in my life. And all of us have the positive and negative emotions all the time, and so it's actually an opportunity for me to get in touch with those emotions with pretty much all the characters, everything from Guilmon from Digimon all the way up to guys like Amon from Legend of Korra. There's that whole gamut of emotion that runs in between, and so I don't have any individual characters that I would call out, because all of them have some sort of attachment. Even if I'm going in to play Soldier A today, I have to be willing to die for a cause and really invest myself in that. So yeah, it's funny because it didn't happen for many years, but in the last probably 3 years or so, because I've been out on the convention circuit so much, people are really starting to identify the face with the voices. And also I think there's just a bigger awareness for voice actors in general. It's just become more popular to be a voice actor. It used to be sort of the scourge of the industry. But yeah, it happens probably at least once a week now, which is really unusual for me. And most often it is in the grocery store or in just some commercial environment, and I'll be talking to a cashier, and I try to be friendly with everybody, so I always strike up a conversation. And it's really funny because I can tell when it happens, even if it's nonverbal. There'll be somebody in line and they're just doing their thing else. And usually they don't say anything, and I know there's some recognition there, but now it's becoming easier for people to approach me, I think, because they see that I'm not some beast that's going to rip their head off and eat their children. So yeah, it's happening a lot more often. I'm doing a lot more on camera stuff too, and a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and on the circuit for Star Wars we're doing a lot of on camera stuff, so people are starting to recognize me out there. It's weird. Well, outside, I don't really do a whole lot outside of voice acting. I don't do on camera, and I don't really have time for hobbies, as it were. Yeah, outside of voice acting, there's really nothing else that I'm doing. I'm starting to play a little bit of music again. I used to play music like 20 years ago, and I'm finding myself surrounded by musicians all the time now. It's really crazy. My girlfriend's a musician, and so I'm constantly surrounded by that, and I have all these guitars on my walls at home mocking me constantly. So I'm starting to pull them off the wall and play them a little bit, so I may be doing a little bit of that in the near future, but I don't want to commit to it yet until I feel like I'm confident enough to hang. Yeah, I've always loved music, and I started doing it just for a hobby, and I started playing guitar when I was really little, and in high school I played in coffee shops. Once I got out of college, I played with a lot of different people, but I ended up in an R&B band. And during the 80s, we were like a 15-piece stage band with choreography and flash pots on stage, playing like Earth, Wind & Fire kind of stuff, all original music. But it was at a time when the only bands in town were hair bands or metal bands. and we're playing at all these clubs, and we're the only R&B band in town, and we're getting our equipment sabotaged and people throwing stuff at us on stage. It was such a brutal time. And I never really got good enough either. That was the other issue for me, is that I was constantly running to catch up. The people that I was playing with were seasoned musicians. They came out of really good music schools, and they had played all over the world. And the only reason they brought me into the band is because I had a truck and I had a day job and I could afford to pay to play at the gigs. And I had a pretty good rhythm sense, so I could hold down the rhythm for them. And I was the token white guy in an R&B band, so that was sort of a little click for them too. But I never really got to be a professional musician. I never made it to that stage, and I never was disciplined enough to play for the 8 hours a day it takes to really become fluent on the guitar. So at this point, I just play for fun, and that's kind of what I've always done. I just sort of fell into the other stuff, and people needed a guitarist or needed a background singer or something, so I just sort of jumped in. But now that I'm surrounded by real, true pros, and I hear what they're capable of doing, I got so much work to do. I have to start over from scratch. I'm like a baby. I love all kinds of music. I've been listening to music my whole life. I love music. I mean, starting with the Beatles and working my way to the modern stuff: jazz, blues, R&B. B.B. King was a huge influence on me. Peter Gabriel, Genesis stuff. Zeppelin was a huge influence for me. And now I'm listening to a lot of newer music. Logic, the rapper, has become a good friend of mine. He lives right in my neighborhood. He contacted me. We're doing some stuff together, and he's an amazing guy. And hip hop is an area that I really haven't explored until now. And I went to my first hip hop show a couple nights ago at the Wiltern in LA, and he was singing and performing for the sold out crowd. And it was just amazing to me. I'd never seen anything like that. Just everybody has memorized every single word to this rapid fire delivery that he's got. And I'm finding a new appreciation for that now. So yeah, I have a wide appreciation for all sorts of different music. And classical, my dad's a classical musician, so I listen to that a lot too. And soundtrack stuff.
What you do.
It was an acquired taste for them. It was really funny because I've always sort of been a goofball, and they were always really worried about me finding my way. And initially, I wanted to be a musician. That worried them even more. But when I told them that I was going to be going into voice acting full time, and I quit a really good position, I was an executive at this film company for 15 years, and I quit that to go into voice acting full time. They thought I was a maniac, and they kept asking if I had a backup plan because I've got kids, I had a mortgage. And so I started doing a lot better financially maybe 10 years ago. And the shows that I had been working on became very popular, and I had a following and whatever. And my parents weren't really aware of that. They hadn't seen any of my shows. They still, I think, I've only seen maybe 2 of my shows. I think they've seen Box Trolls and Rebels. I saw a couple shows of the Rebels at the premieres. But up until 3 years ago, I guess, I brought them to Anime Expo in LA, and they had never been to a convention before. They had never seen me interact with fans. And I got a car for them, brought them to the expo, and they come into this room, and there's 2,000 people there. I'm doing a panel for 2,000 people, and I was just up there by myself, and my parents were sitting with my sister, and she said that they leaned over to her and they said, "Are they here to see him? All these people are here to see him. Really?" And the only thing that really got them interested in going to that was one of my dad's friends who was in his 80s said, "Is your son Steve?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, he's really famous." And he said, "No, he's not. He does these little anime shows. And yeah, he has people that probably like him, but I don't think he's very famous." He goes, "Dude, look him up online." And so it was so funny seeing them come to this thing. And after the panel, they came up to me, and my dad comes up and he goes, "All right, I'll stop hassling you about the backup plan." This is 3 years ago. Because it looks like you're doing okay now. So yeah, it was really funny. It was very difficult for them to accept that this was going to be my profession. My dad was a doctor. He's retired now. And anything that wasn't a realistic day job just did not compute. They really just couldn't figure that out at all. So now they get it and they're having fun with it. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah, well, there's always good goofy cosplays.
Anything you can say on film, that is, of course.
Yeah.
That's the thing we gotta let you know, that we are filming.
Okay, well, my favorite con story, well, there's so many favorite con stories, but the goofiest one was a glomping story. And I was at a convention, I don't even remember what city it was in now, it was a few years ago. And I've been glomped by some big people, big, gnarly, sweaty people. And usually men, but you know, everybody's a little bit of everybody out there. But the one that really took me down was this little girl who was probably about 85 pounds. And I was walking at this con. It was it might have been an anime expo. I think it was an anime expo. It was a huge con, lots of people. I had 3 bodyguards with me walking through on my way to a panel. And just out of nowhere, this girl just comes tearing with her arms out like this, Steve, I love you. And jumps into my arms, just flies right over the bodyguard guys, lands around her arms around my neck, her legs around here, and just takes me to the floor. My head just smashed on the floor. And she's just sitting on top of me, kind of like Ed from Cowboy Bebop, that kind of shit. Just wirely little ball of fire. And she's just laughing hysterically, sitting on me going, I love you, I love you, I love you. And, but she took me out. She almost knocked me out. It was that close from being knocked out. I was so proud of her. It was amazing.
You gotta start putting those girls in the MMA.
Yeah. But I don't encourage this behavior. Don't do it. It hurt somebody. At conventions, usually the first day, nobody knows who I am. They don't make that association. There's so much going on. But after I do the first panel, there's that recognition, and everybody wants their moment. And so people kind of swarm sometimes. And so just to get me from point A to point B, because our schedules are so tight, that's the main reason that we have it. And then occasionally there's a few people who are a little bit trolly and show up at everything and just stand there and stare, and they don't know what the intention is there. So, and there have been issues with other actors in the past, so it's just a safety thing.
Yeah.
That's all. I've never felt threatened by anybody. Yes.
No, I don't know the story.
Yes, this is very personal, actually. There's a little show that I did a long time ago called Cowboy Bebop. And at the very end of the show, I won't say what happens, but at the very end of the show, the last thing he says is bang. He just makes that movement. And it's kind of a critical moment in the episode. And because Bebop was such a benchmark show in my career, I wanted to do something that sort of commemorated that and gave me sort of a reference point if the head is ever swelling too big, I remember where I come from. So I waited till I was 40 to get my first tattoo. This is my second one. And I was actually going in for a consultation for a much bigger piece, a big Hawaiian piece up here. I was going in for a consultation for that, and the guy said, well, while you're here, is there anything else that you'd like to do? And I said, well, yeah, I was thinking about this piece, but I don't want to do a character image. I want to do something that's representative of the show. And all of a sudden, just doing the sound wave flashed in my head. I thought, well, what a great thing to do, because I'm dealing with sound all day long. Nobody will really know what it is. People ask me about the story for it, and so I went home and I took out my video and pulled the audio from it, took a snapshot of it in my Pro Tools, and so this is exactly what it looks like, what the sound wave looks like. And yeah, so I brought it into the guy, and I was only going to do it like this big, and he goes, no, you got to go big, dude, because it's going to bleed. And each one of these lines he dug in like 8 times, so I was a bloody pulp by the time he did it, but he said it would bleed otherwise, or they all turned into big mush. So it's a good trigger for me. It's just a really good trigger for me to remember where I came from and what's important. And even though I made less money on 26 episodes in a movie of this than I do on 1 episode of Rebels, it's one of the most formative things in my whole career. And it's the reason I get to come to these cons and hang out. So yeah, very, very important piece of my life. Yeah, Bebop is the number one thing that people talk about, but there's a few shows from that era. There was Macross was huge for a lot of people. Big O was also another big gateway. Yeah, and some people are connecting with Digimon was huge for a lot of people too. And Digimon was interesting because it's one of these shows that I didn't really understand how powerful it was and how many people were watching at that time. And the other con story that I was talking about before, there was a convention that I did in New Zealand where a guy told me that his son was autistic, and I always tell this at the panel, so if you come to the panel later, forgive me because I'll probably tell it again. But he had an autistic boy, a little 8-year-old boy. He was 8 years old at the time. and he would sit in the corner and just rock, and he was nonverbal. And then one day, Digimon came on, and his son bolted over to the couch, and he sat there just transfixed by it. And his father, it was the first time he saw his son really react to anything like that. And so he looked over and he said, what's going on? He goes, shh. And it was the first real verbal sort of reaction the kid had had. And the dad kind of goes, okay. And he waits for the commercial, and the commercial comes on, and the kid looks over and he goes, I like that, Daddy. And that was the first words out of his mouth ever, 8 years old. And this guy's telling me the story, and right after this happened, the family started watching with the kid every time Digimon came on. And it opened up something in his brain and unlocked something in his brain. And he started speaking. He had all these words in there that nobody knew about. And it made him part of the world. And he got the kid online. He realized there were other otaku out there, and he had a commonality with them. He started making friends. And now he's fully functional. And he brought him back the next day to the con. He actually brought him to the con the following day. He's this huge Samoan dude who's covered in tattoos, really scary looking guy. And he comes up there with his son, his daughter also, and wife. And they came up, and I saw them at the end of the autograph line. I just stopped the line and brought him up, and we just stood there and hugged and cried. And so that particular show was not only a gateway, but it was such a transformative thing in my life. And for many people, apparently, there's been a lot of. I was at a convention in Guam recently. There was a guy who had fought in Afghanistan, and he said that the only thing that kept him alive was Digimon. And his friends gave him poo-poo for watching kids' shows. But he said there was something about that show that connected him to his childhood and made him feel human when he was in such an inhuman environment. And he stood there and he just cried. And again, I started bawling too. So it's interesting, the shows that I didn't expect that show to be one of them that became a gateway for people. And he said that was the first thing he'd ever watched, and that was his interest to anime too. So yeah, it's pretty profound. The other side of it is so much bigger than I ever expected it to be.
Thanks for watching our Q&A session with Steve Blum at Anime Milwaukee. Be sure to like and subscribe to our videos while you're here. If you want to see more from Steve Blum, be sure to check him out on Twitter. Also, while you're here, why don't you watch some other X-Geek videos? You can see our cosplay coverage of CollisionCon 2015, as well as Gaming Under the Influence. I hear they got some sucker playing Five Nights at Freddy's 3 right now. What? What do you mean it's me?